I like to think that the grasp I have on the memories and feelings of my younger self is stronger compared to other people my age. It's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing that I've spent the majority of my life trying to come to terms with. It's mostly middle school that I remember. Those were the most formative years of my life, regrettably, and I'm really ashamed of that because middle school is just the epitome of banal. I was the epitome of banal. Thinking of the person that I was, the person that I can still see in myself to an extent, a person whose, immaturity and self-absorption and indulgent behavior went beyond the normalcy of the average middle school boy and into the territory of just complete psychological instability that frequently caused harm towards people around me, including my friends and my family. It's not necessary to explain everything in specifics. The point is just that I've never fully moved past those experiences I had, and I'm afraid that I never will. There's something inside of me, inside of my mind, a part of me that has been kept in this perpetual limbo of my preteen self, and I spend every waking moment of my fucking life in a back and forth between myself now as a 20-year-old man, which I still don't feel comfortable even saying, and myself of then as a 12-year-old child. I have dreamt of the faces of people from that time who have most likely forgotten that I even existed for several years. Sometimes I forget they even existed until they appear in them. And it kills me. It fucking kills me that even though I've tried so hard to deal with all of this shit from nearly a decade ago that shouldn't even matter to me at this point, I still do. And I probably always will, on a subconscious level at least. When I first entered high school, my initial reaction to these feelings was just extreme repression, telling the voices in my head to just shut the fuck up, not even listening to them at all, not even humoring them, just outright rejecting their very existence. And that's a decent idea when you're 15 and have been conditioned for years to develop a masochistic compulsivity towards the feeling of cold bitterness that comes with self-hatred and isolation, but it's also something that completely deludes your entire understanding of self. And by holding such contempt towards a part of yourself that embodies your youth, you end up becoming completely detached to having any sort of real passion towards anything. It's easy to convince yourself that this is somehow a form of personal growth. I think most people are conditioned to believe that this is how you're supposed to handle things as an independent adult and a functioning member of society. But not when you're a teenager, not when, you're still in high school and you're supposed to be yourself while you can before the rest of the world starts being averse to that. So when I eventually turned 18 and graduated from high school, I had sort of a existential crisis towards who I really was and what I've been doing with my life. Like, who was I really? What is there in my life that I can point to and use as something to hold on to as an example of my identity? Animation, other than YouTube, might be the only thing in my entire life that I've had any sort of consistent attachment to, even during the parts of my life where I deliberately let go of those desires. It was back in middle school when I got really into drawing. I had these youthful ambitions of, creating my own animated series, and that, along with, every other animated show that was airing at the time, was pretty much all I thought about. And as I've changed over the years, my relationship with animation as a medium has changed alongside it. For a while, I didn't care about it at all, but nowadays I think I'm more passionate about it as an art form than I ever have been in my whole life. But instead of just a mindless obsession, I'm really trying to form a deeper appreciation of it. I might have changed a lot over these years, but goddammit, I still have dreams of, being able to create something, even when I've become disillusioned towards the industry being a nihilistic cesspool of hellfire and feces beyond a level of description written language has the capacity to describe. As an adult, I can see with a certain clarity that's hard to have when your sense of rational thought and emotional intelligence is suppressed by the overwhelming throes of teen angst, that the way to deal with these things is to come to peace with this part of you, to accept it. Psychobabblers might call this nurturing your inner child, but it's not just about indulging it, it's about creating a balance. So I do watch animated shows as an adult, but I do it on my own terms, trying to do so in a way that isn't shallow. I try and treat the medium with respect. I go out of my way to seek out animation outside of the pop culture bubble, despite how difficult that can be because of how much of it is centralized within that bubble. I try to watch international animation from all over the world. I even got into anime after years of blindly hating it in its entirety, despite my taste ultimately being niche in that area. I watch shows from my childhood in order to judge them now to see if they hold up under a critical lens beyond just the realm of nostalgia. I even watch shows that I know that I probably won't enjoy just to make myself more informed about these kinds of topics. But really, what's most important to me, and what should be most important to everybody, is to watch content that you can really deem as mature. And that doesn't just mean being beyond PG either. Something that's long fed into my excessively unhealthy misanthropy is that I've spent so much of my life grappling with all of the things I've mentioned here, putting so much effort into bettering myself as a person and coming to terms with these parts of myself in the attempt to grow up and mature as a person, even when it sometimes feels in vain. But I'm living in a culture which actively seems to reward doing fucking nothing at all, just unconditionally accept everything about yourself and never try to change so you remain perpetually a child well into your fucking 30s. It's masturbatory. So nearly 2 pages into the script, having talked about nothing but what probably comes off to most of you as personal bullshit that's completely removed from the point of the video, I hope you can understand my perspective when I talk about how frustrating it is to be a dedicated fan of such a tragically regressive medium like animation. Something I often see online in the animation discussion is the strawmanning of people who speak critically of modern animation as people who are merely biased towards their nostalgia of the shows they watched as children, and that their generation of animated shows suffers from the same issues of wild inconsistency as this generation. I think this counter-argument actually holds a good amount of merit when it comes to people who like to cherry-pick from generation to generation. But I also don't think that a lot of people making this argument realize how damning it is, not just for modern animation, but for animation as a whole, that so many glaring flaws that drag the medium down so detrimentally have sustained for generations upon generations. I want to make this abundantly clear from the outset. I do not want cartoons to be like when I was a kid, because they never will be, because I will never be a kid again. But as I mature, this thing that I love refuses to mature alongside me. It stays in the same unbreakable stasis that it's been in. 100 years ago, it was narratively minimal, short-form, family-friendly comedies featuring anthropomorphized characters. In 2023, it is still narratively minimal, short-form, family-friendly comedies featuring anthropomorphized characters, which make up a significant portion of all animation. Why is animation the only medium that has to deal with this shit? Take film, or even like science fiction and fantasy compared to animation. All of these are mediums that rose around roughly the same time in the 20th century, and they were all mediums that weren't really seen as anything with the capacity to have serious artistic substance starting out. But nowadays, you'd be really fucking hard-pressed to see anybody that isn't completely geriatric saying shit like sci-fi and fantasy are childish, or movies are a passing fad, as they did, generations ago, because creators in that genre were determined to prove that these were mediums beyond such petty reductionism by moving beyond the cheap, pulpy, commercialized entertainment that characterized their early years. But animation, even when it is trying to move beyond its roots into something more self-serious and artistic, still feels as though it's bending to the will of the reductive stereotypes forced upon it. Those are the kind of shows that I grew up on, and we don't need more of those. We need to go even further than them. That's my main argument here. Take this as the thesis of this video, that unless animation stops being for kids, it is never going to evolve artistically. And it's weird because animation, conceptually, on a base level, is not intrinsically a children's medium. There is nothing inherently childish about sequential artwork. That doesn't make any fucking sense. So then why are we treating it like one? Why are we acting like having a medium made up of roughly 80% content aimed towards children is somehow healthy or normal for any kind of artistic medium? If anything, we're just reinforcing the idea that animation is only for children. I don't want to give off the impression that I just hate anything that isn't rated R, and I'll repeat that again because I'm afraid I may be misinterpreted if I don't. There are many animated films and shows that aren't strictly adult that I still enjoy a lot. But I'd also like to put forth the argument that family-friendly media can only reach a certain point of quality. When an artistic vision is deliberately manufactured in order to reach the broadest possible appeal, you lose the capability to create a more impactful piece of art. The elements which give it a true sense of identity become flattened out, making it less evocative and interesting. And it loses the ability to tell a really impactful story because it's forced to strip itself bare of anything that could make it too deep or too unique or too well written, instead becoming something basic and simple and mundane. And I want to clarify again, simple is not bad, it just can only be so good, and there's also too much of it. If you look at the most acclaimed animated films, a lot of the enjoyment of it comes from a very shallow place, boiling down to it looks good. And yes, they do look good. They look fucking incredible most of the time. Even I do this sometimes with certain shows, and it makes me feel bad for being a hypocrite. But herein lies the problem. By critiquing through such a shallow lens, we lower the collective standard of quality of which animation is judged by. And if you're gonna get on my ass for expecting more, fuck you. I am not gonna lower my expectations just because it's animation. Do you not realize how hypocritical you sound? You don't get to praise mediocrity designed for children and then complain about the state of adult animation. Jesus Christ. Every time I ever try to talk to a person about this shit, I always have to recite this long-winded monologue because the entire existence of adult animation is such an unyielding clusterfuck of misinterpretations and contradictions and so many other things that I have to clarify in the strictest of terms what I am referring to anytime I refer to adult animation. The very idea of adult animation or animation for adults has always been such an extremely loaded term. Because of animation's overbearing stigma as a children's medium, adult animation usually defines itself by being overtly inappropriate to children. I'm not even talking about like modern adult animation here. If you look back and watch any of Ralph Bakshi's most popular films, the guy people treat as like the ultimate pioneer of adult animation, they're all filled with sex jokes and stoner humor and gore and satire in exactly the same way as shows like Rick and Morty or Family Guy or South Park. And even though these are films that I can respect for their historical significance, I find it depressing that it's this kind of style that is, to put it bluntly, gimmicky, basically the inception of adult animation in the States. Because this kind of adult animation in reality does nothing more than accentuate the notion that animation is for children by treating itself as a cheap novelty and feeding into childish frivolity even more so than what it intends to be the alternative to. It's adult, but it's not mature. I've already said that word 4 other times in this script, and I'm probably going to use it so many more times throughout this script because it's really the best way I can use to describe what I'm talking about. And animation fans understand this more than anybody, that target demographic and maturity do not go hand in hand with one another. You can have all the blood and sex and violence and drugs and fucking swearing and whatever you want, but that doesn't exempt you from being the TVMA equivalent of an iPad baby watching a 24/7 stream of YouTube shorts. Take, like, Arcane and Invincible, which I'm using as examples purely because they're the most popular. These are two shows which I really feel are examples of the kind of adult animation I'm talking about when I'm talking about maturity. You know, they're well written, they take themselves seriously, they have an actual level of depth to their narratives and characters that makes it clear that the artists behind it are ones who know what they're doing and treat their audience with respect, intelligent enough to be able to stay engaged without requiring immersion-breaking quips or any other form of jangling keys in front of a baby that would sour the overall integrity of a product. You don't even need to be like a non-comedy to do this. Tear Along the Dotted Line is a show that makes me laugh so fucking hard without ever feeling like it's sacrificing the impactful meaning behind its messages or even the quality of writing in its jokes. I often think to myself how weird it is that I'm making a video like this when shows like this even exist, because I am aware that in reality we're living in a time where animation for adults or even animation for young adults that goes beyond beyond the realm of, Family Guy and Rick and Morty ripoffs is actually more lucrative than it's ever been. For the past 2 or 3 years, the animation industry has been in this really bizarre dichotomy where there have been more shows than ever which seem intent to push beyond the boundaries of what adult animation can really be, but simultaneously having such a massive excess of the kind of novelty show I talked about earlier that almost drowns out the existence of the former. What I worry about is the very real potential for the latter, these shows that are made purely for money, written by failed comedians with no experience with animation, and funded by faceless corporations that couldn't give less of a shit about the artistic integrity of the very industry that they control, to completely engulf media of real quality and vision. If anything, it's a fucking miracle this hasn't already happened, and we aren't already living in a dystopian hellhole where every single show is either the 7 billionth Family Guy clone or another Disney Channel original poorly attempting to recreate what Gravity Falls already did a decade ago. And more than just animation from an adult perspective, what this has the capacity to do is make it completely unviable for any sorts of alternative perspectives and ideas whatsoever to see any success in the animation industry. Independent animation is, despite a few major examples in recent years, still primarily an extremely small bubble drastically overshadowed by the major entertainment industries. So if those industries regress even further into stylistic homogenization, there is no serious alternative movement that can pick up the slack. That's why I'm so adamant about my focus on adult animations, because we, as consumers, vote with our wallets. If we keep giving our attention to shows and films that do nothing but perpetuate the status quo and ignore media which attempts to diverge from it, then we're fucking over the industry. And I'm really afraid that the next amazing show that comes out is going to remain obscure and then get quietly canceled without anybody caring for more than 2 weeks, because the animation community, despite how much they claim, don't give a shit about adult animation. There is a certain type of post that I have seen a good number of times whenever I decide to scour social media for what people talk about online about animation. It's something along the lines of, I don't like adult media because it's too juvenile, usually paired alongside something like, a lot of so-called children's cartoons are actually very mature and dark. And you hear that, and you just immediately understand that this person has never watched anything other than these children's cartoons in their entire life, because their bar for what is considered legitimately dark starts and ends at Bill's Cipher. It's a kind of philosophy that is reflective of a grossly shallow misunderstanding of what not only animation as a medium is like, but also just what narrative media in general is like. And I fucking despise it because it seems to be the prevailing notion among a vast portion of people who seriously care about animation. The animation community is a cesspool of childish hypocrites who don't actually give a shit about the evolution of the medium or treat it with any sort of respect as art. They're people who want animation to be considered as more than just simply for children, but perpetuate the regressive stigmas about target demographic in the medium at every turn, even more so than the very people they claim to be rebelling against. They're people who will talk on and on about how animation is not just for kids, and then only pay attention to animation for kids. And I get that there was like an argument to be made about like the logistics of some of these shows being for kids, because I think people see for kids as children's entertainment in the same way that like fucking Elmo is children's entertainment. But when I say children's entertainment or children's show or kids show, I'm talking about pretty much anything that has been designed to be for all ages. That's still something which is designed in mind for a demographic of children, even when it's taking into account older audiences as well. They're people who treat any sort of genuinely disturbing animation as nothing more than something to gawk at, because God forbid they actually engage with anything that falls outside the status quo of the mainstream. They're people who use the facade of activism in favor of evolution of the medium beyond children's media purely as a means to not feel shame for only watching said children's media. They're people who are representative of a general societal regression into childhood present within my generation, because they're too fucking weak-willed to be able to process the fact fact that they are adults with responsibilities, treating animation as nothing more than comfort food because real life is already sad enough. Fetishizing the kind of nostalgia the entertainment industry has been using to manipulate people for their own corporate desires. It's self-centered, it's anti-intellectual, and it's just fucking unhealthy. I know I'm being mean here. I know. I am incredibly aware. Maybe a part of me doesn't even want to believe this because it is so mean, but I am mad. I'm fucking mad at everything. I am mad when Unicorn Wars, which is my favorite animated film of the year and a movie that I feel like has a lot of heart and effort and vision put into it, a movie that I feel really tries to say something about the nature of war and humanity despite its inconsistencies as a full product, has large content creators in the animation community boil it down to, wow, this isn't just for kids, guys, as if that's some kind of fucking anomaly to gawk at, that an animated film can be something other than Pixar Disney slop. If you didn't fucking watch Pantheon when it was being released like I did, dealing with audio rendering issues and incorrect episode releases, you don't fucking get to complain that it was canceled. You're the fucking champagne socialists of the animation community. You were too busy treating Inside Job like it was what adult animation should strive to be, despite being emblematic of all the worst stereotypes of it. I'm sick of people spewing empty platitudes like, animation is cinema. Fuck that. The fucking Mario movie is not cinema. It's a mediocre Hollywood blockbuster whose success lies only within shallow iconography and nostalgia bait. You don't even give a shit about cinema. You didn't even fucking watch Del Toro's Pinocchio. Okay, look. If you want to watch nothing but Bluey, like your whole life and nothing else, fuck it. I don't care. Go ahead. But don't pretend like you actually care about animation, because you don't. Being a fan of only children's cartoons isn't enough to claim to be a fan of animation as a whole, because animation isn't just children's cartoons, and treating it like it is does nothing but serve the interests of corporations who are hell-bent on destroying the medium from the inside out. You know, oftentimes when I see people lamenting the state of modern animation, they often assert a very presumptuous fallacy that it's simply just modern writers and artists being inexplicably worse. I don't buy into this for a couple reasons, primarily because often the people who assert this notion are delusional reactionaries who think every piece of media made after the 2016 United States election is awful because they're only aware of the most surface-level Hollywood consumer-based dog shit. But I also think it's bullshit to pin the failings on artists themselves, because it would imply that the actual creators themselves of these shows are given even the remotest amount of serious creative control over the products they work on. I know I'm kind of exaggerating here, but like, come on, let's not kid ourselves here. This is the animation industry. You would have to either have the unyielding idealism of a battle shonen protagonist, or just absolutely fucking hate yourself to even consider working there. I just don't feel comfortable critiquing artists because most of the time, they barely get a real say in the matter. It would be like kicking a man while he's down, or whipping a slave for not working hard enough. That's not even a metaphor, that's just literally the industry. I mean, obviously there are exceptions to this, but I'd reckon that even with the things they do get to do on their own terms, it's always done in consideration to what is allowed by their superiors. I don't even like The Owl House, but the fact that it was canceled prematurely in part due to more serialized storytelling is really fucking telling. And if you really look at the people behind a lot of current shows, you start to notice a certain trend among shows in regards to quality. When you get guys like Genndy Tartakovsky or Phil Tippett, these legendary industry veterans who are insanely dedicated to their craft out of nothing more than an incredibly pure love for the art, you get stuff like Primal and Mad God, which are just instantaneous modern classics of immaculate quality where you can see the immense passion put into them overflowing within every frame. But when you get someone like Mindy Kaling, someone who couldn't be more divorced from the animation industry, you get a self-indulgent vanity project that is so offensively awful it is beyond a description. I don't even really know if I have a point in what I'm saying here. It doesn't relate to the topic of the video. I wanted to mention this because I think it's really difficult to talk about the animation industry and the state of animation and all this stuff, especially from my perspective where I'm critiquing it, without acknowledging that most of these problems are the results of systems and algorithms and quotas as opposed to individual people. It makes me genuinely sad to talk about this stuff because it feels so nihilistic to try and rebel against the system. I mean, I'm just a guy in a closet recording this stuff on his phone in a college halfway across the country from where I live. I don't work in the industry. Maybe I'm not even the right person to be speaking for animators who actually deal with this stuff. It's easy to say, oh, they should just unionize, but if the Writers Guild Association strike is anything to learn from, that stuff is significantly easier said than done. I'm just angry, if that hasn't been obvious enough from watching this far into the video. I am an angry person. I get frustrated with everything because it feels like I care so fucking much about everything. Way too much, because the more I care about something, the worse I feel when it inevitably fails to meet my expectations. The world will punish you for giving a shit, and this just manifests so easily within how much I love animation, because loving animation is masochism. That was actually the original title of this video before I rewrote it to focus specifically on kids' cartoons. I've honestly been wanting to make a video like this, just, expressing how I feel about all of this stuff for years at this point. Way too fucking long, because I really, really care about animation. It's the only thing I care about in my whole life, and it sucks. It fucking sucks. I'm reading off this script and I'm just thinking to myself right now, what am I trying to accomplish by saying something like this? I'm being such an asshole. I'm just going to alienate people, which goes against what I actually want to do, which is really just to get people talking about this stuff. Because I know that even though I'm ranting and raving like a fucking madman, I do believe that there is seriously a discussion to be had about the way we as consumers treat animation as a medium. I'm not here to gatekeep. If anything, I want more people to be dedicated. That's all I want. I don't want to live in a world where my favorite animated movie of all time makes back a 20th of its budget in the box office. I don't want to live in a world where shows like Pantheon slip under the radar and get canceled after one season despite having a 2-season order because people weren't bothered to care about anything other than what's mainstream. I know I keep bringing that show up, but that's just because it's so fucking good. It's such a good fucking show. It's everything. I feel like the animation industry should be striving to be narratively, but no one's fucking watched it. I am the only fucking person that has watched the show. It's insane. God, I don't know. I don't fucking know, dude. I know that I come off to people as extreme when I talk about how I refuse to watch any children's cartoons made after 2017, but conversely, I don't think we're really going to get anywhere if we just keep bending to the will of the status quo, where progress moves insurmountably slow to the point of just complete stasis. If you're one of the people I've probably told indescribable expletives to throughout this video, you don't need to start hating yourself and all of your favorite shows and become a stubborn schizophrenic elitist like me. I just want you to follow what you preach, because even though they've become meaningless buzzwords at this point, animation is cinema. And animation isn't just for children, and if I ever say otherwise, just fucking kill me on sight.